My name's Preston Blevins, and I'm I guess, the fearless leader of our eco-sustainability initiative in the San Diego chapter of ASCM. And it's my pleasure to introduce a person that I've known for about 20 years, who has the most impressive resume, and I wouldn't even call it a resume. It's almost like, and it's very dense with achievements, let's put it that way. But Jerry started out as an engineer. He progressed in different directions, taking on all the other methodologies associated with lean. And he has quite an interesting career. Right now, he's a key coach, trainer, and advisor with his company, Lean-Right. And I think you can see from the visual on the screen that he's pretty creative. Everything leans right. And prior to that, he was with a company called DJO, in which he was the head of manufacturing. And he won many awards there. For example, and these are all awards that are really meaningful if you are into the lean management style. AME Manufacturing Excellence Award, Industry's Top 10 Best Plant, the Shingo Prize. All those are just top notch. Those are platinum level achievements. And there's more. In fact, I recommend that you go back and take a look at his full resume posting on our website. But he transitioned from being an executive there into Lean-Right, and he's helped many companies since. I think his actual number, and I'll look it up, is I don't know how many was it. You have the number here of facilitations that you took.
Oh,
you took involved in
over 1,000 at least.
Yeah, 1,250 Kaizen events. 1,250 Kaizen events. And so whatever you see on the screen right now is just a minuscule part of his background. And I guess the one that I would be proud of, if I were, of anything, would be that in the San Diego Business Management Consultant of the Year Award, he's won that 2019, 2020, 2021, and again in 2022. Now, that's called dominance. If you were selling a product, you would be investigated by the federal government for manipulating the market or something, market dominance. But at any rate, please take over, Jerry, and help us learn more about being lean and green.
Thank you very much, Preston. I appreciate that. So hopefully you're here for the right reasons. Lean is green, the triple bottom line. I know that a lot of people want to know about that. And we kind of came up with that concept of the triple bottom line as we were delving into our sustainability efforts at DJO Global. DJO, a pretty big company and once the largest privately held company in San Diego. It's changed now. They've moved the headquarters to Texas, and it's called Enovis, E-N-O-V-I-S. But you'll see some examples from the days that I was there. I was there for about 16 years, so it was a big part of my journey in terms of lean and lean is. We'll get to see some of both of those. Here's the agenda for the webinar today. Again, we'll talk very quickly through lean, just if anyone is not super familiar with it. It seems to be a very common term that most people know, but I'll quickly go through a few things related to that. And then I want to kind of just take a minute on what is green and then the triple bottom line, which really is birthed from those two concepts. And then I've got some lean is green examples, as well as how you could start your journey. If you haven't already, how can you get into finding out where the wastes are? And there's a process different than value stream mapping, which is a lean tool. We call it waste stream mapping, and we used it extensively at DJO. It was very helpful. And I'm going to show you some visuals and some results so you can decide for yourselves if that may be something you'd like to do. Sandy is watching the chat. If anybody has a question, he will probably go off mute and interrupt me. If there's something that's pressing, please say so. Otherwise, we'll also have time for Q&A at the end. And I think you could take about 45 minutes for the webinar, depending on questions and any other issues as we go through. So hopefully that gives you an overview for the next 45 minutes. So what is lean? And again, I love this thing. I found this online. Warning contains common sense. I think that's one of the things we're often lacking in business today and just in public in general is we want that common sense in doing the right things as much as we can. And when we talk about lean, if you're not familiar with it, when lean as we know it today really kind of came out of the Japanese automotive industry. And interestingly, Toyota really did a lot of studying of Henry Ford and the capabilities and said, oh my goodness, we're getting our lunch handed to us. We are productive as Ford. We're going to have to figure out how to get better or we're going to be out of business. Now, the Japanese economy in the 1950s was rebuilding after World War II, and they didn't have much money. The nation was strapped financially, and so were many of the companies. And so Toyota had to figure out how to work smarter, not harder, and they couldn't just buy things like Henry Ford was able to do. So they really started creating the Toyota production system, and we really refer to that now as lean manufacturing. When we think of lean in business today, it's really the waste or the excess has been trimmed or removed from the processes. And it's usually those processes provide value to the customer. They're quick, they're fast, and they're meaningful. Customer expectations, and it's also that umbrella of continuous improvement techniques and practices which get everybody involved and drive results. Now, I typically ask people, and I'll just pause for a second, you don't have to answer, but think to yourself, goals of the lean enterprise. And people, but actually it's this, it's quality. And because I thought it was eliminate waste. Well, the reason improve quality is typically first, and I highlight it, is think about this. If you have no scrap, you don't do any rework, you have very good quality, and you're likely to have less waste. And so when we look at those 4 goals of lean enterprise, these are the ones we want to focus on. And I point out the last one, reducing total cost. Keep in mind that total is as the business, as the entity, as a site. We're looking at a total cost solution. We're not just looking at pushing, one problem into another department and raising their cost by lowering ours. It has to be a total cost solution. And when we look at the green side of things, that's really what we're headed for as well. We want a total solution that helps reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, improve our recycling, reduce our source of materials and things like that. We want to look at that total reduction. Now, waste, I love this little graphic. I came across this a few years ago. Worthless activities that steal time and energy. That's just about perfect, right? And if you're not familiar with the waste or the lean side of things, this is the way I usually define it. This is kind of that key tenet to lean. Our businesses or in our organizations is either important to the external customer, meaning they'd like more of it, or they're willing to pay for it. There's all the other stuff we do, which is non-value adding, which is waste. And some of those things are required because they're legal requirements or organizational needs or their accounting requirements. But in general, most of the things that a company does are not valuable to the customer. So again, we have opportunities. Now, Preston and I met probably early 2000s, and this is what DJO, the production floor, looked like this on the left-hand side. Actually, we were kitting till there's kits everywhere. We had temporaries running around trying to find materials. We were just not a very organized business. We had not started our lean journey. We started in late 1999, early 2000, and this is around 2000 May timeframe. And we really had a lot of opportunities to do it. So you can see all those wastes in place: defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing, the downtime of the 8 wastes. I don't know if you can see that gentleman on the bottom. He's smiling, and that's because he just got a job at another place and was leaving DJ of time in our formative years where we were learning to get better. It's a good example of where we were not good. Recently online and had it delivered to your home. Anybody have an example that would like to share? Anybody in the chat out there, Sandy?
Not yet.
Okay, I've got an example. I ordered a vacuum cleaner. My wife was pushing our vacuum cleaner the other day and said, boy, this just doesn't seem to go like it used to. And I realized our vacuum cleaner was about 15 years old and the little brush motor on the front was pretty tired. It wasn't something I could easily repair, so I decided to buy a new vacuum cleaner. And I ordered it, I believe, on Sunday, and it arrived today. So today's Tuesday, so just a couple days. When I got it, it was nicely packaged. It was in a box. When I turned it on, it worked. I didn't have to assemble much, but I had to assemble a little bit. So I look at it this way: is if the vacuum cleaner, if I had to go drive somewhere to pick it up, that probably wouldn't be ideal. Even if they said, hey, we'll save you $10 if you can swing over here to Chino, was where it shipped from Chino, California, and pick it up, that wouldn't be my while. So I was willing to pay for shipping. That made sense. It was packaged nicely. It was protected. So when I got it, it functioned and worked properly. And I did have to do some assembly, but I didn't have to assemble the entire thing. It was some pretty easy stuff after I took it out of the carton. So from a value perspective, I was pleased with what I got. I turned it on and tried it. It's much easier to use than the previous one, a few updates to it. So it was pretty nice. So from that experience, I'm going to ask you guys a quiz. Let's do all of them. Which ones are valuable? Which ones will the customers of these organizations pay for? Go off mute and just call it out if you would like to give us your thoughts. Which ones up here are value adding?
Definitely shipping product.
Shipping the product. Yeah, I didn't want to drive to Chino. Good one, Nick. Where else?
Training.
I would say no, only because training is expected, right? We expect training to happen, and we can't charge more for our products because we're training people. What else?
Building product or providing service.
Like a key one. So shipping and building the product and service. There could be one or two more. What do you think? Is there another one up there that would be worthwhile? My package arrived. My vacuum cleaner arrived. Connected with the box.
Packaging product.
Yeah, so packaging. Now, one of the other ones besides training that people say is, what about warranty? This way, I didn't order the vacuum cleaner hoping I could exercise the warranty when it didn't work, right? So pay for a warranty and you might find that meaningful to you, but you don't want to have to exercise it. So a warranty is one, just like training, it's kind of on the edge. And I would say, no, really, we only care about these three. Okay, these are the ones that most people care about. Training or warranty claims, you could maybe argue that would need care, but I would say probably in a pure sense, no.
Well, if the warranty is included for free, then I would count that as
Yeah.
value. If you have to pay extra for it, then no.
It depends on, you know, what you want to do, how important it is to you, and if it'd be worthwhile. It's a good point. So about it in business, everything, and I mean everything, takes time. Now, people are typically paid for their time, therefore time is money. And Einstein figured that out at a graphic from Gary Larson here. That's where he figures out time is actually money. And lean is green, right? Because if we can be leaner and more efficient, less money we're going to be spending. Wastes. There's a nice lean tool. Wastes. So we're not stuck with them. We can usually put some effort in there and really knock those out. And so again, you can see the downtime, the 8 wastes. Good news is there's tools we can use to attack those wastes and get rid of them. Just like there's tools that we can do to attack, reduce waste and stuff going to the landfill and things like that. Just a quick thing on lean. Now, what is green? Now, we're all on this and we're interested in it. Most people have known green for some time, but specific. Green means low waste and environmentally friendly, sustainable, right? Recycled or reused, low greenhouse emissions. We're not putting a lot of stuff into the air. Non-polluting and this goal, the goal that we used at DJO for many years when we talked about sustainability, because our customers expected us to be more sustainable. was to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. We make this sustainable, that we can carry it forward. And we had to look at our customers to see how we could reduce landfill generation. We could, recycle and reuse components of devices we made and things like that. So it was and that's what we were digging into in the 2009, 2010 timeframe. So one of the things we looked at when we started lean and green was the triple bottom line. But of when we were asked by our customers, by our, the people we sold our products to, they said, hey, that's, you're providing a lot of cool things. And we said, it's really the triple bottom line. I don't think I coined it. I think it was our investor relations person who did. But it's really, we think about rewards, risk, and reputation, the 3 R's. And I don't mean, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but think in this term, rewards is if I have a very lean and streamlined process, I'm going to have better profits. That waste typically means better profits or better profitability, more cash in the coffer. Risk reduction, this is the other one. When we have a lean, efficient process and it's green, we're reducing overhead, we're reducing compliance costs, reducing the cost of waste, defects, monitoring, all those different kind of things that you'd have to do if you're putting out greenhouse gas emissions, and you can reduce them or eliminate them. You can eliminate a lot of those costs, and that's again another benefit. And finally, the reputation side. You have a better company, a more desirable company to work for. People want to work for a company that's thinking about green and sustainability. You get better retention. Your communities want to be associated with you, and your stakeholders really appreciate that. So that's that triple bottom line. The 3 R's, in my opinion, and I think in many others would be, that's a competitive advantage. So we definitely want to move in that direction whenever possible. Here's some examples of lean is green. DJO days, excuse me. DJO is still seen, and again, it's called Enovis now. But one of the main brands they had was Donjoy. And you can see Carlson Palmer then with the Cincinnati Bengals is wearing his knee brace. That's a carbon fiber knee brace that lasts the life of the athlete. Might need some refurbishment or repair at times, particularly with football players. But that would help him because he had knee surgery at one point when he was with USC, and make sure that his knee is stable and he can go forward. Well, we did a lot with athletes. We did a lot with everyday consumers using these products. Started figuring out ways that we could be leaner and one of the things that we had was this project, lean is project of the braces. So we had to actually paint the braces different colors. And we got with the Air Pollution Control District of San Diego County, the APCD, and our supplier, Tri-City Paint, and we figured out a way to reduce the volatile organic compounds, or the VOCs, we used. In some cases, we were able to eliminate them almost completely. We also put in a vacuum paint system that allows to change between colors without having gas emitted, volatile organic compounds. And we also reduced a lot of our solvent usage by more than 50%. That was a huge improvement. And by making things greener, we actually ended up saving close to $24,500 a year. So it was a pretty good project. It took a while to complete it, but it was an overall benefit for not only the environment, but also our process and for sustainability. Here's another one. Now, this is one that everybody kind of wondered about. We said, well, we have water bottles and we're providing them to employees and things like that, but it's not so much the cost of the water, not overly expensive, but we'll think about how many we're either putting in the landfill or sending off to recycling. How can we avoid that? And keep in mind, before we had good recycling programs, a lot of these bottles did end up in the landfill. They weren't recycled the way they should have been. They were just tossed in a trash can and not put in a recycling bin like we're so used to seeing those these days. But 10, 12 years ago, that wasn't as common. So we actually purchased reverse osmosis systems, or RO systems, and put them throughout our facilities. And the only bottled water we had was for guests if they didn't have their own cup or bottle or things like that. And they were kept in a very few limited areas. And we ended up preventing about 250,000 plastic bottles from either going back into recycling or into the landfill each year. And our annual savings, even after the RO systems were in place, was over $36,000. So definitely a worthwhile effort. Overall thing, we looked at baling, recycling, doing cardboard baling so that we could actually sell the cardboard materials. We did a fairly large amount of packaging in our processes, and we got stuff in from suppliers and corrugated and things like that. We ended up recycling about 1,000 pounds of good cardboard every month, and we're able to sell those back to the cardboard and corrugated manufacturers at a pretty decent price. And then we had the whole benefit of not, having things going to the landfill. The other thing that we did is we decided that we needed compactors for things that we couldn't actually recycle or reuse or, reduce. We wanted to get into much better compaction, so we would reduce how much was going to the landfill. Typically in compactors, you get about a 5-to-1 compaction of, food wastes and packaging and styrofoam plates and all the other kind of things we were dealing with at the time. And what we realized is that if we couldn't recycle some of these things at the time, and we could bale them and, smash them a lot better, we'd actually save about $30,000 a year in landfill costs. Now, the baler itself only cost $28,000 completely installed. So in 1 year, it had paid for itself. Now, we obviously went beyond this and trying to come up with other ways to reduce items that we would even put into the trash, but that was one of the key things we did at the time. The thing we did, and this was something that came out of our investor relations and office team, is they switched to 30% post-consumer recycled white office paper and put that in all the copiers and all the printers and so forth. Again, the goal was to try to be much more sustainable. And then again, we went on doing more and more and see if we could get even like 40-50% recycled, as long as we still had good imagery and for the things that were printed and mailed. This was only about $8,000 a year in savings, but still it was a savings and moving in the right direction. One of the other ones, and this is, you see it in airports, you see it in restaurants and cafeterias, you see it in malls and things like that.
Right.
Years ago to see people sorting their waste. So we had plastic bottles, cans, and other things, mixed paper. We set up these kind of bins throughout the facility, and it really made a huge improvement. And we had every about $3,600. And once we bottled the bins and put them in place, that was only maybe about $1,200 or $1,300 to get everything in place. And we had this throughout all the facilities in our Vista complex, which was at one time 3 different buildings and 900 employees. But it was very worthwhile. The other thing we did, and this was a number of years ago, but still worthwhile, is we got rid of the huge overhead lights that were using a lot of energy and replaced them with actually brighter, better high bay light fixtures that use less energy. And SDG&E even helped fund some of that so we could reduce our costs. So you can see right at about $30,000 in capital, and our annual savings that amount every year going forward with those improved lighting. Show, and I actually have this book, and if you guys haven't ever read a lean book or you want to, Lean is Green too. Finished that a couple weeks ago by Paul Akers. He works at a company called Fast Cap up in Bellingham, Washington, just north of Seattle, and they're a real Lean is Green model. And he had a nice little example. And as I was preparing for this webinar, I thought I'd share it with you guys. And if you want to pick the book up, there's a resource at the end. You can get it on Amazon and your booksellers. But Paul had this thing. He said, I have these little packets of Splenda, and I have my cinnamon, and I'm putting.
It's from January.
For a question? I'm sorry. So he likes his Splenda and his cinnamon in his tea. And they said, if I can eliminate these little packets of Splenda, which he didn't like opening, and they're really small little packets, like, the similar little yellow packets. He said, hey, I could have a Splenda cinnamon shaker. So I'm going to buy Splenda more in bulk. And then when he, almost 3 hours per year. Okay, not, but then he said, look at the distance. There's 10 times 3 teas per day. I guess he drinks a lot of these teas. 30 steps saved per day. So it's about 6 miles per year. I'm walking, doing this stuff, and it's all waste. And then what I'd like to see thought, hey, if I think waste I've eliminated by going to this bulk Splenda cinnamon shaker, and you can see the bullet points there. Somewhere, somebody has to put the Splenda in the little tiny packets, whether it's in a machine or, whatever the process is. You have to make, print, and package the little packets. You have to deliver the Splenda packets to the store. The store has to take inventory of them and display them. And then daily, he takes one out, puts it in his tea, and then throws the excess away. The garbage truck has to come and pick up the trash. Now, it's not just for Splenda, but for everything. The garbage truck requires fuel, and that's, again, a whole nother waste stream. And then it gets transported to the landfill. The landfill needs to receive the trash, bury it, plow it under, or do whatever they're going to do. Someone mismanaged all the landfill resources. So there's a lot that goes to it. Now, he didn't eliminate those things completely, but it was the thought process that he was talking about. We really need to about how much impact we have with these small examples. Another one on a much grander scale. I actually toured this facility a number of years ago through the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. They had a conference in the Baltimore area, and this is close by in Maryland. And I went into the site, and they were very proud of the fact that they had zero landfill and had zero landfill for a number of years. And I said, well, how did you guys get there? And one thing I noticed when I was there is I couldn't find any trash cans. Trash cans, they had recycle bins, they had things for wood and metal and other recycling things, but there was no trash cans. And I asked the individual who was he said, yeah, we worked on getting rid of those. We pretty much only have, I think, one in the breaker area and maybe in a conference room. That's it. We just don't have them because we have zero landfill. We compost everything, we recycle resource. I mean, it was cardboard that I could see anywhere in the facility. It was almost all in plastic retrievable containers. So, of GM or GM's customers, they basically had said, hey, we need to get to zero landfill. And this is kind of how they did it. So again, the Baltimore Whitemarsh, Maryland plant, they build hybrid transmissions for GM's full-size SUVs and pickups. They had operated at zero landfill waste since 2007. They do a huge amount of recycling. They even had a waste energy facility. They would take composting and use that to fertilize the trees and the lawns on the property. I mean, they went all out and did an amazing job. They even had a few things they had to dispose of or work on with some outside companies to handle for them. But in general, they pretty much did most of it themselves, and they were a very modern facility. The only thing that was kind of frustrating for me on a particular example, because I'd been to the plant, is that GM actually closed this in 2019 due to cost-cutting measures. So they, I guess, had to pick different sites to shut down. And unfortunately, this one plant, which was one of their, zero landfill sites and had been for many years, was closed, but not because they were green or not because they were lean, but because that was the decision that was made by the organization on a grand scale. And I think it's important to remember, you can be very, doesn't necessarily insulate you from the other challenges and strategies within an organization, as this happened with GM. Journey. And again, I think it's not easy being green, but in some ways it's easier than you think. And I want to show you guys a technique called waste stream mapping, and I'll show you some examples we did. And that's when Preston was talking about we were trying to improve and change the world back then. So again, waste stream mapping. Think of your site or your plan as kind of a black box or the four walls approach. Now, when you look at this map, you say, okay, we've got inputs, things that come into the building, right? That could be everything, and you can do this in a fairly short period of time. Raw material, water, gas, electricity, office supplies, food, plastics, all the different things that enter the building. Then what exits the building? What are the outputs, right? Wastes. So think about everything that exits the building. Finished products, obviously, maybe there's cardboard, plastic bottles, other recycling, landfill, food waste, serveware, e-waste like batteries, inkjet print cartridges, things like that. Sewage, obviously, more. But if you take this approach, we start to narrow in on where you can make improvements in your site. Steps, again, measure your waste streams. And this is something that took us a fair amount of time the first couple times we did it. is getting all the weights, tracking all the volumes, getting the counts. We had to work with our facilities, janitorial, and other folks to figure out what these were. And we had to weigh a lot of things on our industrial scales. And then we said, okay, where can we start to reduce things? One of the things we picked immediately, eliminate all styrofoam. So even with our suppliers or vendors who would cater in for a zero styrofoam facility, please make sure you're using something environmentally friendly that can be composted or whatever. And we still had a few, people who deliver styrofoam. And then we had to say, hey, please don't do that. And it took a while to make that transition. I think almost 2 or 3 years. Yep. Identified and implemented those green projects. I showed you a handful of them before for one of our sites, trying to get to that zero landfill, 100% recycling, composting, water reduction. Our facility in Tijuana, for example, they worked on the no flush, no water toilet things that have the little filters and so forth. And they got their water consumption way, way down. And in Mexico, water's expensive. It's a precious resource. And so they said, hey, look, we've eliminated, I think they took their water consumption down by about 80 or 89%. It was huge. They even put in some recycling operations to reuse water for process use. But again, anywhere you can put in solar panels, do any greenhouse gas emissions, do carbon footprint improvements, anywhere that you can see something, start digging in and getting them done. Now, once you've done these, you go back and then measure again and say, how did we do? We found we were able to get into 40, 50% reduction just in our first pass. And then we'd have slightly less each time, but 30, 40% the second time, 20, 30% the third time, and we just kept working on it. And again, these processes, it's continuous improvement, it's continuous to be done and finished and say, good, we're all finished. We got to go back and look at things again. So this was the process we followed. I'm going to show you some examples, not all of them, we had a bunch, but I want to show you a few waste stream mapping examples that may be meaningful. We'll call it the global green team. We actually had a global green team at the time, and we did waste stream mapping in each of the facilities. I'm just going to show the ones that are in bold here and just high level, but we treated these like Kaizen events or like Kaizen blitzes where we were working on waste stream mapping. That we did on our facility in Vista, we had representatives from facilities, the machine shop, environmental health and safety, investor relations, IT, and manufacturing, because all those people had an input for it. There was our black box mapping. You can see the materials and everything coming in on the left-hand side of the screen, and then what was leaving on the outside. And we noticed when we looked at the outbound stuff, we could make some quick, and they weren't all in manufacturing. There were a lot of them that were facility related. Foams, papers, filters, air conditioning filters, batteries, toner cartridges, all kinds of things we looked at. Said, okay, let's highlight the things we can dig into right away and get some, names and people assigned and folks from the green team working on these items. And we got into them right away. So again, these are some of the things that we used. I'm just putting this in here for reference for you. How to reduce your waste and recycling programs. Some of these you probably already have in place, but if you haven't, you got a nice resource with janitorial crews and other office folks, facilities people, your IT department to see how else we could do things. Electronic waste, have the janitorial crews, if appropriate, make sure they pull the recycled stuff out of the waste and put them in the appropriate recycle bins. And then we really spent a lot of time with education. How can we eliminate having to put stuff in the trash and try to have things be recyclable if at all possible? And then of course, in manufacturing, a little more straightforward, a lot of things that could be improved and worked on. List again, this was the first one we came through, and I won't read through them all, but these are the things that we divided and conquered trying to make better. So the one I just showed you was Vista. This was Austin. Again, the green team at the Austin site. A lot of facilities, manufacturing, engineering, quality assurance, purchasing, and even IT at that facility. And they did their waste stream map, same type of thing. You can see all the inbounds on the left and the outbounds on the right. And again, they came up with some pretty cool ideas in terms of recycling cell phones, inkjet printer cartridges, light bulbs was a big one for them. They found a way to do light bulb recycling, which was great. Recycling even for tools. So drill batteries, DeWalt batteries, things like that. They were able to reuse some of the air pillows for packaging. So that's an opportunity. And all the different ideas as a team and prioritized them and put their action list together, same as the other group. Actually a sewing and knitting facility, hosiery and things like that. So they had the waste streams to deal with in terms of wastewater and dyeing and things like that. So there's some definitely good opportunities to improve there. And you can actually see me on the far left from days gone. The up on the right and started identifying what could we improve, how could we make it better, how could we reduce those wastes. And again, they had some things about Ronald McDonald House with pop tabs from sodas that you could actually do for another good Samaritan type of thing, how to deal with rags, paper, work orders, setting up recycling bins. So those kind of things were put in place. And they did one other thing that we had with lids on recycling magazines, recycling shredded paper, plastic bottles, the same type of thing we had done at the Vista site, they put in place. Cartridges, and they also were dealing with thread and thread bobbins, other things like that. So they had some neat things they could do in terms of reducing cardboard. So they switched from the cardboard that was coming on the right, the actual trays from the supplier on the left, and that helped reduce the cardboard inbound. List of actions that needs to complete. And then this was our South Dakota facility up in Clear Lake. So we had another facility up there doing a lot of electronics, SMT, printed circuit board, and other electronics manufacturing. Similar green team in place, working on improvements. And they had 3 different buildings to go through. So they had 3 different workforces and 3 separate analysis. They were fairly similar. But again, they found a lot of opportunities for improvement. And one of the things I thought they did was pretty cool is they said, okay, what can we recycle? And then what can we not recycle? And how can we get that changed? And I thought that was a neat spin that they did on that. In time, and you'll see it in just a second, we went through the trash cans. We did a literal waste walk, looking through trash cans, looking through bins, looking through things that are being thrown away and saying, how can we start to reduce these? You know, where's you can see examples of people, you know, putting things in the trash bins. Here it is, you know, why are these recycled items in trash bins? How can we educate, inform, and get people thinking? Looked at collapsible containers. You can see the ones on the left there. Those are like a plastic material. They would erect into a box. You can tape them, put things in them, and then break them down and save a lot of space with them and reuse them. They could usually be reused, say 7 or 8 times before they just, you know, became too worn to reuse. So again, that was another cool idea that came out of that spot. And they had other things, you know, trying to save on plastic, recycling of materials, even stuff that was coming off the backing of printers for printing labels. How could we reuse that material? Their list of things and stuff that they could work on knocking out. So lessons learned, I thought this was an interesting graphic. I like the speed, 120 kilometers per hour. There's crutches, a wheelchair, and then there's lessons learned. It's that I think we would take away with what we know today. If you think of today's world, people expect companies to be responsible, make a difference, preserve resources, minimize waste, and obviously not be polluted. Like waste stream mapping and lean is green projects that I've shown you examples of today can really help make our businesses more sustainable and have less impact on the environment. And as I mentioned before, people have a different expectation today, particularly the generations from the 90s and the early 2000s. They want to see more than just a title, more than just a salary. They want to make a difference. They want to give back. And it's not only important from the employment side, but also for the consumer side. How can we be more responsible, more sustainable? And I think the nice thing about lean is green is it really provides for better rewards, reduced risk, and an enhanced reputation, which is that enviable triple bottom line. All right, we're right on time. We've got about 5 minutes before we hit 45 past the hour. Hopefully I didn't go too quick for anybody. If you have questions, now would be the best time to discuss those. ahead, Sandy.
Yeah.
I
anybody have
do,
questions?
if that's okay.
ahead.
I have one if that's okay. But before that, I want to say hi to my instructor, Mr. Freedom at Cal State San Marcos. I had one of the modules of ORM a certificate program with him. I had the pleasure for him to be my instructor. um, so
Thank you, Raymond.
one thing, hello, one thing I've been reading about and I've been interested to know about is the email impact on carbon dioxide emission on footprint. And then some companies are encouraging what's your thought on that? Because some companies now are encouraging use less email, use your internal chatting system, whatever software app they use. For instance, one spam email has a footprint of equivalent to 0.3 grams of CO2 emissions. So what do you want to, what are your thought on that?
Well, I think when you get into it, we actually covered email at DJO because we really tried to say, if you don't need to reply all, don't. If you don't need to actually even send an email, don't pick up the phone or whatever. The biggest issue is people tend to send emails and then copy a lot of people, and it just actually wastes people's time. If there's not some direct communication, there's something that can be handled in a more efficient manner, like you said, with like a Slack or an instant message, I would advocate for that. But I think the thing that companies have to go back is reset the expectations of why would you send an email? How are you communicating? And what's the best mode to do it? Some things should be face-to-face. Some things could be texted or using a Slack or some other kind of process. But again, we just don't need to be today. And I know some people that get literally hundreds of emails per day, and it takes them hours per day out of their time to get through all their emails because maybe there's something important in there. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but Napoleon had a way he answered his mail, not his email, because I didn't have it back then, but he'd only look at his mail once every 2 weeks. And his rationale was, if it's really important, somebody will let me know ahead of time. And otherwise it can wait for 2 weeks and I'll just do it and, take a couple hours and do it all at once. And that was his rationale. And I think to some extent, we need to think in those terms of don't send emails if you don't need to. Don't copy people just for information. We need to kind of get away from being overly communicative. We don't want to be ineffective, but we don't want to be wasting everybody's time with unnecessary emails. I don't know if that answers your question, Raymond.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Source reduction, source reduction and education.
Anybody else have any questions?
I see the chat has some things, but I'm not sure if I can actually read everything. So I'm counting on Sandy.
Yeah.
They were, the questions in the chat were actually already asked, I
Right.
think.
Good.
It's Preston. I do have a question, Jerry. When you were at DJO, did you really, or with any of your clients, attack the lean aspects of new product development?
Yes, definitely. One of the very first major value streams we addressed was new product development. That was back in 2001. So we'd only been into our lean journey for maybe about a year and a half. And we had to go through the new product development process and figure out how to make it much more efficient, much more effective. We were able to cut our lead time to release a new product in half. And we're able to double the number of new products we could release every year if there was a demand for those. So absolutely. And new product development is an opportunity like anything else. It's a process that is usually filled with wasteful, parts and components that can be simplified or streamlined.
May I ask you a question? And
Certainly.
that is, I'm looking either to get GRI, Certified Sustainability, or the
Right.
SAS FSA credential. Which do you think is better?
I'm not familiar with the latter one. I am familiar with the GRI. We did the GRI submission back in 2010 or 2011 and went through that process. So the GRI at the time was pretty good. It's comprehensive. It takes time. I imagine they're both probably pretty good. The key thing is you want to start the measuring and understanding where you're at and then driving the improvements, because either way, you got to be making the improvements, or the reporting is just an academic exercise. You want the benefits, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty strong over in Europe, but you know, around here, it's either stakeholders or shareholders. One of the two is driving it here.
Yeah, we had our customers actually expecting it, and so we began that process 2009, 2010, and it continued on for as long as I was with the company. I don't know where they're at now because I'm not working with them directly, but it was a very worthwhile effort.
Thanks.
Sure. And I changed slides from the question slide to if you want any references, I've put the websites up for the Global Reporting Initiative that walks you through how you'd measure all your greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprint, things like that, and how you can share that with customers or other people that care about what's going on in your organization. And then the 2-Second Lean is a great read. A lot of good aha moments in there. A bit on green, a lot more on lean, obviously not. So lean is green is kind of an output of where he got to with his Splenda and other ideas, but definitely a fun, worthwhile book if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Jerry, it's Preston. I had a question or a request. I remember when you were at DJO and you acquired I think it was 2 or more suppliers, not because they were necessarily bad suppliers, but you thought that you could lean them out substantially. And as I remember, some of the outcomes were, and maybe you can explain how you got there,
Sure.
but you would increase output by 50% and reduce space required by 50%. Was that
Yeah.
correct statistics, or am I?
You're actually shooting a little low. There was one of the suppliers in the example you probably remember is we had a supplier that provided cold therapy packs to us. They were things that were made on a machine about the size of maybe a pool table. And in the facility and where they made them and how they handle everything was very non-lean environment. They had about 14,000 square feet, probably 30 or 40 employees. They were in Oklahoma. Not very lean, not very efficient. We figured out a way to move that when we acquired that facility and all that. Obviously, a number of the people had to find other jobs because we moved it to California. But when we set up the new process and we're running it, we needed, I think, a total of 3 people to run it. And the total square footage was about 1,500 square feet. And we were roughly 94%, reduced waste, 94% reduced footprint, 93% improved efficiency. It was phenomenal, but that's because we looked at it through a different lens rather than the people who had started the company and kicked it off and said, oh, we're going to do it this way. We figured out a much more efficient way to run it and almost no waste at all from the process. It was either finished product or recycled raw material. So it was a huge benefit. And we did that with more than just a few suppliers, but that was one of the most outstanding ones. Did that answer your question, Preston?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Any
Good
other
question.
questions?
Well, I tried to stay to my 45 to 50 minutes and give you guys some time for housekeeping at the back end. If there's anything else I can answer, I'll stay on. But if there's things you have to do to close the session and talk about the next time, please take it away.
Well, I've just got a couple of comments, and then after that, I'll talk about upcoming sessions. I really like the examples that you showed us in your presentation. I like the theory is one thing, but I like to see who's done it and what kind of results have you gotten. So that was really great. I had, on a personal aspect, I had a chance to tour the GM Saturn plant many, many years ago. Actually, in fact, it was in 2002. I was a guest speaker at the Apex conference in Nashville back then. And one of the treats was to go on an all-day plant tour there. And it's the closest I've ever seen to the actual Toyota manufacturing system. I was absolutely blown away. And I was sad to hear, they closed the GM plant. I guess people didn't like efficient cars anymore. That must be it.
Well, they also closed the Saturn product line, right?
What's that?
They actually discontinued the entire Saturn product line for GM.
That's right. That's right. I guess SUVs were coming into vogue and no one wanted small cars anymore. In fact, if you still want a small car, you have to go to a foreign manufacturer. I don't think Ford, GM, or Chrysler are building small cars anymore. The other thing I noticed about the Lean is Green presentation is that that's a great way to identify waste and then eliminate it. I've been in similar situations. I used to be a consultant, have 40 years background consulting and education and so on. And I've led a number of projects that identifying waste was not enough. Sometimes you have to change the process, the technology that makes the product, and even update the computer systems. On that note, I've implemented a lot of ERP systems, and to do it properly, you have to measure where's the business process, how does the software work, and then close that gap. And a lot of people end up not closing that gap efficiently. Either you have consultants who don't understand that, or people who've not been through it before, and that actually contributes to more waste. In engineering, concurrent engineering is the term I was thinking of when you were speaking of that earlier. And what is the waste there? Well, in communication and time. If you had concurrent engineering, you would design something that is buildable and sellable and maintainable all in one shot, because you bring in people from around the corporation. Anyway, just a note, just a comment. If you'd like to comment on that, please do.
No, I think you bring up a good point, and the key thing is it's not just the planning side of it, it's the execution. And we found one of the benefits was get as many people from the different sites involved in understanding and seeing this so that they can all take a step forward and make a difference. And that's the big benefit of doing the action side of it and involving teams, is it's not just me or even, one site leader trying to move all the stuff along. It's everybody understanding why we're doing it and then participating and making it happen. And that's the big benefit, whether that's concurrent engineering or waste stream reduction or recycling or whatever it is. Getting more people involved really helps.
Anyway, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Any other questions?
I guess I had one. I've been having slight technical difficulties on my end, so apologies if you've already been asked this, Jerry. I was curious if you have any recommendations for companies that are maybe in the early stages of this process of increased efficiency and sustainability.
Approach we mentioned earlier, and try to look at the waste streams mapping. I'm trying to figure out where do we need to improve, and if you can do that on a even if it's a smaller company and you're just kind of getting started, becoming aware and looking at the opportunities and then start tackling them is the best way you can go, Nick. The challenge a lot of companies have is they want to get a project team together and then put a charter and have all this kind of stuff, and then ultimately priorities change and nothing really gets done. So it's almost better to just do the best you can right away, and knock stuff out. And then you can always come back and visit it, but you've got that gain while, a lot of companies are still planning and going through who's going to be on the team. And that's just not the best way to hit it. That's a little bureaucratic. And so I'd say, be lean, be mean, and try to do it all short with a good involved workforce as soon as you can.
Awesome, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Jerry, thank you very much. You did a great job. And I think your greatest gift is you've enabled so many people to continue to do good things.
This is our website. It's sandiego.ascm.org/eco-sustainability. If you get to ASCM San Diego chapter, simply click on eco-sustainability, and everything you need to know about eco-sustainability is right here. This was started a year and a half ago by Preston, who's our fearless leader, as he said in the beginning, to talk about what the challenges are with eco-sustainability, what does the initiatives provide, a lot of things to click on. There's a lot of organizations like the Carbon Disclosure Project, the UN SDG, and a bunch of others, which I'll let you take a look at. And we try every month to have an event, Today, obviously, was our webinar on Lean and Green. Upcoming, we have, starting yesterday, was a course on Score DS. Here it is, Lean and Green today. Next month, on July 25th, we're talking about the Carbon Disclosure Project. And we also record all of our webinars, as you probably noted tonight, and they will appear on this page. There's also, if you pull down this, we have events, a separate listing of our events coming up, and all of our webinar recordings going back in time to the beginning of last year when we started this. Let me also highlight our curated section. There's 9 sections here: Blue Water, Education and Consulting, Environment, Social and Governance, or ESG, GHG, Greenhouse Gases, Global Reporting, Green Biz, Greenhouse Gas Emissions, SCORE, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And each one of these, I won't go into them. If you click on these, each one has a list of available articles and presentations. There's a couple of TED Talks in here, other videos. And I encourage you to check out the articles here if you want a brief introduction to any of these subjects. There's plenty of articles inside. For example, in ESG, we've got reports from various companies like CGI, Amazon, PepsiCo, Caterpillar. There's also one on project management, on IT, and also IT sustainability, greenhouse gases. And I made a list, but I'm not going to read them. But go ahead and take a look. And every month we try to upload some additional articles. And we also have bios of everybody on our board. And if you're interested in joining us, let us know. And we look forward to seeing you. A lot of important people here.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you, Jerry,
Nothing else,
again.
we close the call.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you,
All right,
Jerry.
thank you very much, everybody.